In this first video in a series of turning a vintage mannequin into a display bust, I show you how I go about fitting artificial eyes into the torso without having to drill a hole in the back of his head. This is a Rootstein torso from the Ross collection, originally released in 1990, and the model's name is Tristram. He is in a very dynamic pose, and he has a very attractive face, like all Rootstein mannequins do. And unfortunately, his parts are very rare and difficult to find, and I will not be able to put him back together as a full mannequin, so he is going to become a display bust. But before I start the process of fitting his eyes, there is some damage that needs to be taken care of on his torso, and I want to take care of this now just to prevent it becoming any worse while I'm in the process of fitting the eyes. And you can see he has a great big chip on his chest, and I'll be filling that in. I basically sliced off the sides of his torso and the connecting arm plates, and I made sure that those measurements were wider in the front and more narrow on the back, and that is purely because I do not want the finished bust to appear like a cube with a head attached to it. And this was pretty much my process. I measured from the center about 10 centimeters, trying to make sure both sides were approximately the same. Of course, he's got an asymmetrical pose, so that was not 100% accurate. He's ended up with one nipple, which is inside the line, and another which is outside. I'll figure out what to do with that later. And I pretty much just sawed down like a loaf of bread through his shoulders. Then I flipped him over and I cut down parallel to the surface of his chest and his back. And then I removed the pieces, and this is pretty much what I've ended up with. He had a bit of a hairline crack running across the shoulder that I don't know if you can see. I've filled in with some polyester filler. And then I sliced the metal plate that is situated at the bottom. I need to keep the sides open at this stage because I'm going to be fitting the glass or polyglass eyes, and my arm is only so long, so I'm going to have to go in through the sides. So I'm going to move to the eyes now. So hopefully from these images you can see that Tristram's eyes are actually slightly flatter in the inner corner. They are not completely anatomically correct, and that is just because it's better to have a slightly flatter surface when you're painting an iris on a mannequin's eye. So obviously the glass eyes I'm about to fit are anatomically correct. This is a 26mm sized eye, and this is a 24mm eye. And silicone eyes are also a good option. This is a 25mm silicone eye. It's actually my favorite size if you can find them. And this is a 26mm silicone eye. And if the eye is quite squinted, you can actually get away with a 22mm eye, and that is what this is. All these sizes work perfectly well in a human-sized mannequin. You're going to want to make sure that you're protected, so make sure you've got a mask and some rubber gloves, and I have my Dremel strung up, and I have a flexi attachment to it, which makes things a lot easier. You don't have to have that flexible attachment, but I definitely like it for fitting eyes. And I'm going in with a cutting bit. It's not a drill bit, it's for cutting out, and I go pretty much straight into the eye. And you can see it sort of vibrates a little bit there. You've got to be a little bit careful because sometimes you can get a bit of resistance from the fiberglass, and you do not want to be breathing this stuff in, so make sure you wear a mask. And I just vacuum it away periodically because obviously you can't really see what you're doing if you get this buildup of ground up fiberglass on the surface of the eye. And go straight down, go straight into the eye. And you can get these cutting bits in all sorts of different diameters. This one's a little bit bigger than I usually use, and you can kind of see, you've got to gauge how far into the corners of the eyes you want to take this thing. You can kind of get away with the inner corner a little bit more, but that outer corner of the eye tends to be a little bit sharper, and you want to just make sure that you don't create this kind of weird round point where the two eyelids meet. And that inner corner actually gets completely recontoured when we're fitting the eye, so you don't need to worry about that at this stage, and you will see that coming up, how you get a nice round finish to that inner corner of the eyelid. Sometimes they drill it out a little bit easier than others, and this one's quite good. The thickness of the mannequin's shell is actually nice and consistent. Sometimes you find you have a big blob of fiberglass in the back of the eye area. Now I am just putting some tape to protect the eyelids, because what I'm starting to do now is move the Dremel around at a bit of an angle to start eating into the underside of the eye, and I'm not trying to create a perfectly smooth inverted sphere. At this point I'm just trying to get 2 cavities, one for each eye, that have a similar depth and that both eyes can fit into at appropriate angles. We want it to result in an attractive stare, and we want the eyes to be looking in the appropriate direction for the sculpt. We don't want them to look wall-eyed or cross-eyed or anything like that. So I'm also going to be putting a layer of polyester resin around these eyes, so they don't have to be perfectly smooth. That's not the MO. Now I'm just changing the Dremel bit. I'm going for something that's got a little bit more width at the top of it, and this is going to help me get in behind the eyelid there. I'll put a link in the description to all the different types of Dremel bits that I'm using here, or at least something very close to what I'm using here. And you want to be very careful when you're drilling out these eyes that you don't create any damage. Well, you want to try as hard as you can to not create any more damage to the surface of the mannequin, obviously. So you want to approach with caution, and there is actually the very crease of the eyelid, the upper eyelid tends to be where it ends up getting thinnest. So you have to be super careful there to not create a hole in the surface of the mannequin, and it will depend on how deep set the mannequin's eyes are in the sculpt. I'm just sort of trying to approach with caution to not create anything that I don't want to happen. And unfortunately it does happen, and you can see here I'm about to come through the front of the mannequin. There we go. And then I kicked myself, and then I thought, you know what, at least I'm showing you what not to do, and I'm going to show you how easy you can repair it as well. So I'm moving this bit of tape back and forth, obviously depending on which eyelid I'm working on. The upper eyelid tends to get in the way a little bit when you're trying to drill out the back of the lower eyelid, just because it sticks out a little bit further. So you want to really make sure you take care of that top eyelid, I would say. So you can see here that the little gizmo that holds the bit into the Dremel does have a weird texture on it, and you want to really be careful that you don't knock out any of that upper eyelid. And yeah, the fiberglass can be quite brittle, so sometimes you want to I have my Dremel on a lower speed rather than trying to get through it really quickly. And you want to think about how thick a human's eyelid is as well. That helps, and it should be pretty consistent. The polyglass eye is probably a little more spherical than what a Rootstein mannequin's eye tends to be sculpted as. I think they sort of take a little bit of a stylistic kind of liberty, and they actually flatten the eyes out slightly because they're not quite as curved as a human eye is, and I think that's probably just something to do with the way that they paint the eye. The inner corner is a little flatter, and so you end up having to make these eyelids slightly, sometimes in the corners, a little bit wider than what they are in the center. But that all depends on what size eye you're using, and the sculpt, the character of the eye in the sculpt. Right, so now the same as before. Just go in and cut out that initial shape. It's interesting all the different colours that they have. And this one's got like a reddish pink gel layer, or whatever you call it, and sometimes they're green, sometimes they're turquoise. Right, here on this angle you can see how close I have to get to that crease, and that's where that little problem happened. To get the sort of the apex of the curve of the eyeball right in the right position, you do have to get the center of the eyelid quite thin. So yeah, you want to be careful. Yeah, so I have my bit as long as I can so that I can avoid chipping the eyelid. And this is pretty much what I get to before I change the type of sanding bit that I'm using. So now I've changed to a drum type Dremel bit that has a layer of sandpaper basically around the outside of it, and what I'm just trying to do is get it a little bit smoother so that I can test how these eyes fit, and I just want to make sure that I don't create a rough surface back here that will scratch the polyglass eyes while I'm testing them. And here I have my hand taken up inside Tristram's head, and obviously you could cut a hole in the back of Tristram's head, but I actually want to try and keep his beautiful head shape nice and smooth, so this is why I'm actually doing this a little bit more difficultly than what it would be if he had a hole in the back of his head. There you go, you can see that damage from where I went through the eye nice and clearly, and I have here a brown eye that I'm using for testing because I don't want to get a scratch on the surface of the actual eye that I'm about to use at this stage. Just want to sort of make sure that they fit nicely. Here I have a piece of sandpaper that I've folded over in half, and I'm just using it like an emery board to sand out the outer corner of the eye. The Dremel can't quite get that angle very nicely, so I just use a bit of sandpaper there. And for the inner corner, I make it a tube and roll it up, and I kind of just sand around that inner corner with a more rounded roll of sandpaper. Once it's smooth inside the eyelids, I test to see what the eyes look like on all angles. And then I have a chopstick here, 2 chopsticks that I've broken to the correct length, and that is what I use to hold the eyes in place while I'm testing what they look like. And it's good to have them slightly shorter than what you want them, and the ends of them rest in the very back of the head, and they fit in the back of the eye obviously, and that is what holds them in place while you're just adjusting them and making sure they look good. And I feel like I have to go over this in every video, and I pretty much do because I use this in all of my mannequin restoration projects. This is polyester automotive filler. Follow the manufacturer's directions and just mix a small amount when you're fitting these eyes. And what I'm doing is applying it to the back of Tristram's eye with a chopstick or something disposable, whatever you have. And once that has a nice sort of even amount around the inside of the eyelid, I take the eye, which I've covered in plastic cling film, or in this case I've just used a blue plastic bag, stretched it over the eye, pushed it into position. I have my chopstick that is the right length to hold this eye in place inside the head, and I just push the chopstick into the back of the eye, make sure it's sitting in the desired position, and then I just wipe it off with a cotton bud or something just to make sure it's relatively smooth. And you could just hold it in place, I guess, if you can handle holding it there for about 5 minutes until it cures, but the chopstick does a good job. Now here I'm doing the other eye obviously, and this eye has that hole I created on the crease of the inner eyelid, so I'm just trying to make sure that that is filled in from behind as well. And then I do the same. I put the eye covered in plastic into position. You could always draw a pupil on top of the plastic if you're a little bit confused about which way the eye is looking. Push it into place and support it from behind with the chopstick, or just hold it there. Wipe off the excess with the cotton bud, and that's it. You want to make sure that this polyester automotive filler doesn't really fall back around the flat edge of the polyglass eye, because you want to be able to get it back out. You do not want to trap it in there at this stage. That's what we're going to do in the next part of fitting the glass eye. And this is what we get, and you can see I didn't quite fill that little divot that I made in the eyelid, so I'm going to go over it with a little bit more of the polyester automotive filler. I've mixed a new batch up, and I'm just going to go over the hole that I created in the crease of the eyelid and just push a little bit more into the corners of the eyes. You can see there's a little hole there on both sides where I didn't quite get enough in from the front this time rather than from behind, and this just gives a matching contour to how the eye fits, and that's why we didn't really need to sand it so that it was completely smooth, because this polyester filler does that for us. So once it's cured, you can go in there and you can remove the chopstick from inside his head, go in there and reposition it so that the eye is just held in there by the resin, and push down and the eye should just pop out, and this is what you're left with. And then we sand it. We're going to just get some sandpaper like I did before, fold it over a few times for the outer corner of the eye, roll it into a roll to sand the inner corner of the eye, and just create a nice smooth consistent surface on these new eyelids. You want to leave it to harden maybe for about half an hour before you do this. Don't do it too early because it might just crack and break off. And this is what we end up with. It's probably a good idea to just wipe all of the dust off, put the eyes back in place, see what you've got, and make sure you like the way they look. And of course I have sanded with very soft grade sandpaper all of the resin that was on the surface of his face around his eyes. Now I am spraying some grey undercoat around Tristram's new eyelids, and I'm just going to do around his eyes at this stage because I do have to do some more work to his body. I have to close in the sides of the bust, so I can't spray undercoat over his entire form at this stage, because I'm going to have to do that again anyway once I've done all the fiberglassing. So I'm just going to spray around his eyes, and then I will fit the eyes from behind, glue them in place, and then I will just mask off this area to protect it while I'm doing the fiberglassing of the sides of his body. Right, so time to fit the eyes into the body, and you can see I've just managed to prop this eye up. That's the chopstick holding the eye in from behind. I basically have some of that polyester automotive filler on my finger there, on the glove, and I have to just feel this. I can't actually see what I'm doing. And you can see it's quite difficult. I have to reach right up inside there. If he didn't have such a long torso, it wouldn't be such an effort. But if I had a hole in the back of his head, this would be a lot easier. But because I'm trying to keep the contours of Tristram's skull, because I don't want to have a pate, I think that's what it's called, covering a hole in the back of his head, this stage has to be done just by feel. You have a limited amount of space to move your hand around inside his head, and it's good to just get one eye locked in place. Once you know that's secure, then you can move on to the other eye. And this is what it's like on the inside, and you can see it's not pretty, but look, his eyes are beautiful and he has a lovely stare. So please check out the next video in the series where I close in the sides of his torso with fiberglass. He gets more undercoat and he also gets painted flesh tone, and I am not sure how his face is going to be painted, and if you've got any ideas about that, please leave them in the comments below, and please make sure you check out that video when I post it on my channel. Thanks again, bye.